Have you ever met someone who seems to need absolutely nobody? No close friends? No trusted circle? No people they call when life gets difficult? No one they regularly spend time with? And yet, they walk through life appearing completely fine. Calm, independent, untouchable. But what if that image is hiding something much deeper? What if the person who claims they need nobody is actually carrying a story that most people never see? Stay with this video until the very end, because you are going to discover a powerful psychological truth about avoidant loners that can completely change the way you understand people, relationships, and even yourself. By the end, you may recognize patterns that have been affecting your life for years without you realizing it. Most people look at someone with no friends and immediately make assumptions. They assume that person is antisocial. They assume they are arrogant. They assume they simply prefer being alone. But human psychology is rarely that simple. Behind every behavior is a reason. Behind every wall is a story. And behind every person who keeps everyone at a distance, there is often a struggle that started long before anyone noticed. The truth is that people are not born avoiding connection. Human beings are naturally wired for belonging. From the moment we enter this world, we seek safety through connection. We seek understanding through relationships. We seek strength through community. It is part of who we are. Yet somewhere along the journey, some people begin to move in the opposite direction. They stop reaching out. They stop trusting. They stop letting others get close. At first, the change is almost invisible. It may begin with a disappointment, a broken promise, a betrayal from someone they trusted, a friendship that ended unexpectedly, a period where they felt ignored, rejected, or misunderstood. One painful experience may not seem significant on its own, but pain has a strange way of accumulating. It stacks quietly in the mind, experience after experience, disappointment after disappointment, until a person starts drawing conclusions about the world around them. They begin telling themselves things like, "People always leave. Nobody really understands me. I can only rely on myself." These beliefs do not appear overnight. They are built through repetition. The mind learns from experience, and when negative experiences become dominant, the brain starts creating protective strategies. That is where many avoidant loners begin their journey. What looks like confidence from the outside is often self-protection on the inside. What appears to be independence may actually be emotional armor. The person is not necessarily running toward loneliness. They are often running away from the possibility of being hurt again. Think about that for a moment. Many people fear loneliness because they focus on what they are missing. But avoidant loners often fear emotional dependence even more. To them, needing someone feels dangerous. Trusting someone feels risky. Opening up feels like handing another person the power to hurt them. So they make a decision, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously. They decide that distance is safer. The problem is that every solution comes with a cost. When someone begins removing people from their life, they may feel relief at first. There is less drama, less disappointment, less vulnerability, less emotional risk. But slowly, something else starts happening. They become accustomed to carrying everything alone, every challenge, every fear, every burden, every struggle. And because they become skilled at handling life alone, people around them often assume they are strong. They assume they do not need support. They assume they are perfectly fine. But strength and isolation are not the same thing. A person can appear strong while quietly fighting battles nobody knows about. A person can seem independent while secretly feeling disconnected. A person can spend years convincing others that they need nobody while desperately wishing they could find someone they truly trust. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings in human psychology. We often judge people by what they show us. We rarely stop to ask why they became that way. The avoidant loner is not always hiding from people. Sometimes they are hiding from pain. Sometimes they are protecting wounds that never fully healed. Sometimes they have spent so much time relying on themselves that they no longer remember how to rely on anyone else. And here is where things become even more interesting. Many avoidant loners do not see themselves as lonely. In fact, they often take pride in their ability to stand alone. They convince themselves that needing nobody is a sign of strength. That complete self-reliance is the ultimate form of freedom. But beneath that belief is often a deeper question they never fully answer. What if the walls that protect you are also keeping you trapped? Because every wall has two sides. It keeps danger out, but it also keeps connection out. It blocks betrayal, but it also blocks trust. It prevents disappointment, but it also prevents intimacy. Over time, a person can become so focused on avoiding pain that they unknowingly avoid the very experiences that give life meaning. And this is why understanding avoidant loners requires more than surface-level judgment. It requires looking beneath the behavior, beneath the silence, beneath the distance. It requires recognizing that some of the most isolated people are not choosing loneliness because they love it. They are choosing it because somewhere along the way, loneliness started feeling safer than connection. But safety and fulfillment are not the same thing. As you continue watching, you will discover what is really happening inside the mind of an avoidant loner. You will see why they push people away, why friendships often feel difficult for them, and why the very strategy they use to protect themselves can become the thing that holds them back the most. The deeper you look into this pattern, the more surprising it becomes. What appears to be a simple preference for solitude is often the result of an internal conflict that never truly goes away. On one side, there is a natural desire to be understood, appreciated, and accepted. On the other side, there's a powerful instinct that says, do not get too close. Do not become dependent. Do not give anyone the chance to disappoint you. These two forces pull in opposite directions, creating a struggle that many avoidant loners carry every single day. This is where the hidden psychology begins to reveal itself. Many people assume emotional needs disappear when someone spends years on their own. They believe that a person eventually becomes comfortable without companionship, but the human mind does not work that way. The desire for connection remains. It simply becomes buried beneath layers of caution. Instead of expressing that desire openly, it gets pushed into the background. The individual learns to ignore it, suppress it, and pretend it no longer exists. At first, this strategy can seem effective. Expectations become lower. Dependence becomes unnecessary. There is no need to wait for messages, seek approval, or worry about whether someone will stay. Life feels more controlled, more predictable, more manageable. But every psychological defense comes with consequences. The mind is designed to adapt. Whatever behavior is repeated long enough eventually becomes familiar. If someone repeatedly chooses distance, distance starts feeling normal. If someone constantly avoids emotional exposure, openness begins to feel uncomfortable. What was once a temporary response slowly becomes a permanent habit. This is why avoidant loners often struggle to explain their own behavior. They may not even realize how much they have changed over the years. The transformation happens gradually. One decision leads to another. One withdrawal becomes another step backward. Eventually, keeping people at arm's length becomes automatic. The strange thing is that many of these individuals are highly observant. They pay attention to people. They notice patterns. They recognize dishonesty quickly. They become experts at reading situations because experience has taught them to stay alert. Yet this awareness sometimes creates another challenge. The more they analyze others, the easier it becomes to find reasons not to trust them. Every flaw becomes evidence. Every mistake becomes confirmation. Every inconsistency becomes a warning sign. Instead of seeing human imperfections as normal, they begin viewing them as reasons to maintain separation. Their standards become increasingly difficult to meet, not because they are trying to be unfair, but because they are trying to protect themselves from future pain. This creates an invisible barrier. When someone approaches them with kindness, they may question the intention behind it. When someone offers support, they may wonder what is expected in return. When someone tries to build a friendship, they may unconsciously search for reasons why it will eventually fail. As a result, opportunities that could have become meaningful relationships often disappear before they have a chance to grow. What makes this pattern even more complicated is that avoidant loners rarely see themselves as fearful. Fear does not always look dramatic. It does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it disguises itself as practicality. Sometimes it appears as extreme self-sufficiency. Sometimes it sounds like wisdom. The person tells themselves, "I work better alone. People create problems. I do not have time for unnecessary relationships." These explanations may feel logical, but beneath them there is often a deeper concern that remains unspoken. The concern is not about people themselves. The concern is about emotional exposure, because genuine relationships require something that avoidant individuals find difficult to give. They require access. They require honesty. They require allowing another person to see parts of you that are not perfect. And for someone who has spent years protecting those parts, that can feel incredibly uncomfortable. Imagine carrying a valuable treasure for years and constantly worrying that someone might steal it. Eventually, you stop showing it to anyone. You hide it. You lock it away. You convince yourself that keeping it hidden is the safest option. But eventually, something unexpected happens. The treasure remains protected, yet nobody gets to experience its value, including you. Many avoidant loners treat their emotional world in a similar way. They guard their thoughts, they protect their feelings, they conceal their vulnerabilities. Over time, this becomes such a normal way of living that they forget what it feels like to share freely. Yet deep inside, there is often a quiet contradiction. They admire loyalty. They respect authenticity. They appreciate meaningful bonds. They long for understanding. But because those experiences require trust, and trust feels uncertain, they remain trapped between desire and hesitation. This internal conflict can be exhausting. Imagine wanting something while simultaneously resisting it. Imagine hoping for closeness while instinctively creating distance whenever it appears. Imagine seeking acceptance while making it difficult for anyone to truly know you. That tension creates emotional fatigue. It becomes a cycle where the person never fully experiences the connection they seek, yet never completely abandons the desire for it either. The most important thing to understand is that this pattern is rarely about superiority. It is rarely about believing others are beneath them. More often, it is about adaptation. At some point in life, emotional detachment seemed like the safest option available. It solved a problem. It reduced discomfort. It provided a sense of control. But solutions that protect us during one chapter of life can become limitations in another. The habits that once felt necessary can eventually prevent growth. The strategies that once created security can quietly create isolation, and the longer these patterns continue, the more deeply rooted they become. This is why understanding the avoidant mindset requires looking beyond appearances. Beneath the calm exterior often exists a person who has become extremely skilled at managing life independently, yet has forgotten how to let others share the journey. And that brings us to an even more important question. What happens when years of emotional self-containment become a way of life? What happens when a person trusts only themselves for so long that genuine closeness begins to feel unfamiliar? The answer reveals consequences that most people never see, and those consequences can shape an entire life. As these tendencies become stronger, something important begins to change. The issue is no longer simply spending time alone. The issue becomes what prolonged emotional separation does to a person's inner world. Because when somebody spends years depending only on themselves, they start developing a completely different way of moving through life. At first, it may seem like an advantage. They become highly capable. They solve their own problems. They make decisions without needing reassurance. They handle setbacks privately. While others search for guidance, they push forward alone. This level of self-reliance can look impressive from the outside. Many people even admire it. But there is a hidden cost that rarely gets discussed. Human growth does not happen only through personal effort. It also happens through shared experiences. It happens when different perspectives challenge our thinking. It happens when trusted people help us see blind spots. It happens when support arrives during difficult moments. When someone removes themselves from these experiences for too long, their world can become smaller without them realizing it. The danger is not always visible. It develops quietly. A person starts carrying every responsibility internally. Every disappointment stays locked inside. Every concern remains unspoken. Every burden becomes a private matter. Over time, this creates emotional weight that nobody else can see. The strange thing about emotional weight is that it does not disappear simply because it is ignored. It accumulates. Many avoidant loners become masters of functioning while exhausted. They continue working. They continue achieving goals. They continue handling responsibilities. Yet beneath that productive surface, there can be a growing sense of emptiness that is difficult to explain. Everything appears normal, yet something feels missing. This happens because achievement and connection serve different purposes in human life. One helps people accomplish things, the other helps people feel understood. A person may succeed in many areas while still experiencing a quiet sense of disconnection. That feeling often creates confusion. Since they have trained themselves to rely on logic rather than emotion, they struggle to identify what is wrong. They tell themselves they should be satisfied. After all, they are independent, they are capable, they are managing life successfully. Yet fulfillment continues to feel distant. This is where another pattern begins to emerge. The longer someone remains emotionally unavailable, the harder it becomes to recognize genuine care when it appears. Healthy relationships require practice, just like any other skill. Communication improves through use. Openness improves through use. Mutual understanding improves through use. Without that practice, even positive interactions can feel unfamiliar. Imagine someone spending years inside a quiet room, then suddenly being placed into a crowded environment. What feels normal to everyone else may feel overwhelming to them. Something similar can happen emotionally. When authentic people enter their lives, they may feel uncertain rather than comfortable. Acts of kindness can seem suspicious. Consistency can feel unusual. Honest interest can create discomfort instead of relief. Not because these things are bad, because they are unfamiliar. The human brain tends to prefer what is familiar, even when familiarity is not helping us grow. This explains why some avoidant loners continue repeating patterns that leave them disconnected. Their habits feel predictable. Their routines feel safe. Their isolation feels manageable. The unknown feels far more threatening. As a result, opportunities for meaningful relationships sometimes slip away. Someone reaches out. They hesitate. Someone offers friendship. They pull back. Someone demonstrates loyalty. They question it, not because they want to lose those opportunities, but because old conditioning keeps influencing present choices. This creates a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to break. Distance leads to fewer relationships. Fewer relationships lead to less trust. Less trust leads to greater withdrawal. Greater withdrawal leads to even more distance. The cycle feeds itself year after year. What makes this especially challenging is that many avoidant loners become extremely good at convincing themselves they are content with the situation. They create explanations that justify their lifestyle. They focus on the problems that relationships can bring. They focus on drama, conflict, disappointment, and inconvenience. What they rarely focus on is everything they are missing. They miss the encouragement that arrives during difficult seasons. They miss the perspective that helps them grow. They miss the sense of belonging that comes from being genuinely known. They miss the strength that comes from facing challenges alongside others. Most importantly, they miss opportunities to experience life more fully. Because life was never meant to be carried entirely alone. Every meaningful chapter in human history involves connection in some form. Families, communities, partnerships, friendships, mentorships, teams. People thrive when they share experiences with others. Even the strongest individuals benefit from support. Even the most capable people need understanding. Even the most independent minds benefit from companionship. Yet avoidant loners often spend so much energy proving they can stand alone that they never stop to ask whether standing alone is actually helping them become their best selves. That question matters, because there is a major difference between strength and emotional isolation. Strength allows a person to face challenges. Emotional isolation forces a person to face everything without assistance. Strength creates resilience. Emotional isolation creates unnecessary struggle. Strength gives freedom. Emotional isolation creates limitation. The two may look similar from a distance, but they are not the same. This realization can be life-changing. A person may spend years believing that their greatest achievement is needing nobody. Then one day they recognize that true growth is not measured by how much weight you can carry alone. It is measured by how fully you are able to experience life while remaining open to meaningful connections. That understanding changes everything, because the goal was never to become dependent on everyone. The goal was never to abandon personal responsibility. The goal was never to lose individuality. The goal is balance. The ability to remain strong without becoming emotionally unreachable. The ability to remain self-sufficient without becoming disconnected. the ability to value independence without sacrificing human connection. And that leads to the most important lesson of all. If a person spends years building protective barriers around themselves, what happens when those barriers stop serving them? What happens when the very habits that once felt necessary begin preventing them from experiencing a richer, more meaningful life? The answer reveals a truth that many people do not discover until much later than they should. At some point, every person must face a difficult question. Not a question about success, not a question about money, not even a question about achievement. The question is this: are the habits that once protected you still helping you, or have they quietly become the very thing holding you back? This is where the journey of the avoidant loner reaches its most important turning point. Many people spend years believing that survival is the same thing as living. They become so focused on avoiding disappointment that they stop pursuing deeper experiences. They become so committed to self-preservation that they forget growth requires risk. They become so accustomed to emotional distance that genuine closeness begins to feel unnecessary. But there is a difference between existing and truly living. Existing means getting through each day. Living means allowing yourself to experience life fully. Existing means protecting yourself from every possible threat. Living means understanding that some risks are worth taking. Existing means staying inside familiar patterns. Living means having the courage to step beyond them. This is the lesson many people discover much later than they should. The greatest limitations are not always created by the outside world. Often, they are created by the boundaries we build inside ourselves. At first, those boundaries seem useful. They create order. They create predictability. They reduce uncertainty. But over time, they can also reduce possibility. Think about how many opportunities in life require openness. Trust requires openness. Meaningful companionship requires openness. Personal transformation requires openness. Even confidence requires openness, because confidence grows when people face uncertainty rather than avoid it. Yet many avoidant loners unknowingly spend years doing the opposite. They become experts at staying within emotional comfort zones. They learn how to avoid situations that make them feel exposed. They become skilled at keeping everything under control. The problem is that growth rarely happens inside complete control. Growth happens when people allow themselves to experience something new. Growth happens when people challenge old assumptions. Growth happens when people stop letting fear make decisions for them. This is why true strength has been misunderstood by so many people. Real strength is not refusing help. Real strength is not pretending you never struggle. Real strength is not acting as though nothing affects you. Those behaviors may look powerful from a distance, but appearances can be misleading. Authentic strength is being honest with yourself. It is recognizing where old wounds still influence current choices. It is recognizing where self-protection has become self-limitation. It is recognizing where fear has disguised itself as wisdom. That level of self-awareness requires courage. Many people would rather continue repeating familiar patterns than confront uncomfortable truths. Familiarity feels easier. Familiarity feels safe. Familiarity asks nothing new from us. Yet every major breakthrough begins with awareness. The moment someone realizes that their habits are no longer serving them, change becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. The avoidant loner often believes that personal freedom comes from needing less from others. However, there is another form of freedom that is even more valuable. It is the freedom to connect without constantly expecting the worst. It is the freedom to trust your judgment without assuming betrayal around every corner. It is the freedom to share your thoughts without fearing that vulnerability automatically creates weakness. That kind of freedom cannot be achieved through withdrawal. It can only be achieved through growth. And growth always begins with a decision to stop letting the past dictate the future, a decision to stop measuring every new person by old experiences, a decision to stop assuming that every meaningful connection will end in disappointment, because every human being you meet is not the same person who hurt you before. Every opportunity is not identical to the last one. Every chapter does not have to repeat the previous chapter. Life changes when your perspective changes. One of the most powerful truths in psychology is that people often become what they repeatedly practice. Practice suspicion long enough and suspicion becomes natural. Practice avoidance long enough and avoidance becomes automatic. Practice emotional distance long enough and emotional distance starts shaping your identity. But the opposite is also true. Practice courage, and courage grows. Practice openness, and openness grows. Practice healthy connection, and connection becomes easier. The mind is adaptable. That adaptability created the problem. That same adaptability can create the solution. The future is not determined by who you were yesterday. It is determined by what you repeatedly choose moving forward. This message is not about becoming dependent on others. It is not about abandoning personal boundaries. It is not about trusting everyone without wisdom. It is about refusing to let old fears become permanent prisons. It is about recognizing that human beings achieve their highest potential when strength and connection exist together. Because strength without connection can become isolation. Connection without strength can become dependence. But when both exist together, something remarkable happens. People become resilient. People become fulfilled. People become capable of facing life's challenges without carrying every burden alone. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The people who appear the strongest are not always the ones standing by themselves. Often, the strongest individuals are those who have faced disappointment, faced rejection, faced painful experiences, and still chose not to close their hearts completely. They understood something important. Being guarded may feel secure. Being unreachable may feel comfortable. Being emotionally distant may feel easier. But none of those things create a meaningful life. A meaningful life is built through growth, purpose, understanding, and genuine human connection. So if you recognize parts of yourself in this story, remember this. Your past may explain your habits, but it does not have to define your future. The walls you built can be lowered. The patterns you learned can be changed. The path you have followed for years can take a different direction, because your greatest potential is not found in hiding from life. It is found in fully participating in it. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is not standing alone against the world. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is allowing themselves to be truly seen.